end of last week, that Blue Cross Blue Shield has given North Reading, announced what it's going to project the increase at. And we were very surprised to learn that, I don't have the accurate figure, but I want to say it's in the order of about 2.5%. So that 2.5% as opposed to 15 or 12%. So when you do the math and you calculate out at about 43, 44,000 per percent, you can see that this is well into the $400,000 additional money that is very likely to be counted on as potential revenue. Very good.
I think that's in response to the state pushing the GIC. I mean, it's a competitive market.
Without a doubt, I think that a lot of attention has been Blue Cross is really looking at this because while not a lot of communities have jumped on board on the GIC, there's a lot of effort in communities to research it, evaluate it. There's a whole procedure that needs to go in place, and we're doing that now.
Right.
Mr. Balakonis is working with the various town unions to become educated on the various plans. Both groups have made their presentations. There's an insurance committee meeting coming up. So health insurance reform is on everyone's mind. And but that's a substantial decrease because we've been looking at percent increases over the last number of years that have been in the double digits.
Right.
So to come in at such a low rate or such a low increase is, I think, just a real beneficial. It's a real benefit to the town. The question then tonight, apparently, at the Board of Selectmen is how do you allocate those funds? And I think some preliminary conversation has been, if that is the case, two questions. What out of priority 2 or the remaining priorities would the school committee set? And we've set priority 2 as the next level.
Right.
And then secondly, what implication does that have for potential override? And if we only set priority 2 and achieve that, does that mean that we just carve off the last one and leave it alone, or do something, put it aside, or do we look for other ways to manage it?
David, I believe we may have someone who was at the selectmen's meeting.
The Board of Selectmen is that they have voted to put that in, and basically on priority 2, there's like a $40,000 difference. Well, it wasn't there, I just got it secondhand. Okay. But that the board has basically gone to fund priority 2 out of those funds from the health care. And there'll still be an override question. So, yeah, there'll still be an override question. So that's good news that's a start.
Yes.
That's a start.
And I believe we, David was notified by Mr. Mosseri, and I was later on Saturday. And the question at that time was, if they are still going to keep the override, I guess it becomes a moot question, was if we got funded fully for level 2 and leaving level 3 out for now, would we support not putting an override question? Would we pull our request for an override back?
Can I just add, and this is a very important question, but I'm just looking at my notes here. Keep in mind that even with priority 1 and priority 2, there are at least a couple of assumptions that need to be made about the school department budget. One, that still includes the need to raise athletic fees by $35,000.
Right.
And it's perhaps more a question in my mind, but when there was an agreement to support the status quo and priority one. Part of achieving that was to take out of the school department budget, small capital
Oh, that's
of
right.
120,000, and to fund 70,000 of that small capital out this April,
Right.
out of free cash, and consider it as a separate, it would not be factored into the budget.
Right.
And that an additional 50,000, the remaining 50,000 would be deferred
Till October.
until October.
Right.
And that also, I believe, would not be considered part of the operating budget, that it would be out of capital funds at that
Right.
point. So that number Carl and I had a discussion this afternoon, that number going back to the warrant where it says FY09 Prop 2.5 limit does not include the 35,000, because it's not in our, but we have to generate
Right,
that.
Right.
in our revolving.
And it also does not include the small capital.
Okay.
So, I just want to make sure that I was clear on that. And that may also account for why if you're doing the math, it's a little bit.
Yeah, there's,
I mean, that's no small amount. So that's not going to be made up. At least the intention, even if it goes through priority two, is not to use that additional money to go back and negate the need to raise the athletic user fees,
Right.
or to keep this small cap.
Well, those
Right.
would have to remain in an override.
Yes, or in the override, or, but the understanding that 70,000 of that would be targeted regardless of the override.
Right, from free cash.
From free cash as
And
part of
related to-
capital.
Well, I haven't heard anything that makes me think that's changing. That's
Right.
in the spring.
Right.
That's correct. Right. So I just wasn't sure if that was.
we have a finance planning meeting on Wednesday morning, and we'll probably get an updated recap.
I guess the question from my point of view is if the selectmen are going to come close to totally funding, or I would like to say totally funding priority two, but they're still gonna put an override on the ballot, then we should include our priority three on that override.
Absolutely.
Correct?
Those are important things.
Right. I mean, these are things that we cut last year, the libraries and mainly the libraries and technology staff.
And that librarian means that we don't have access to a number of online services
Right.
that the kids
We
should
only have one
have.
person at the high school.
It also means that we don't have the libraries at the elementary, at the computer rooms at the elementary open full time.
Right.
And that phys ed teacher at the high school is a critical
Yep.
elective for our students. And I think in that group also was I'm getting tired.
Technology.
Yeah, the integrated technology
Right.
teacher at the secondary level.
Right.
So, which is another critical function. So it's about $320,000 when you take priority three plus the fringe benefits that go with it and the small cap and the 35,000. And it's another 70,000 as the town hopes to recover the 70,000 that are being allocated for small capital out of free cash this spring. And that would be a subject, I'm sure, that would come up with the planning meeting. And frankly, the selectmen have worked so hard on all of this. It really is amazing what they've been able to do for the schools. But we do still need to fund this budget if we can. And
Just the small capital deals with primarily textbooks, new acquisitions of textbooks. And that's why we had discussions about, could we split that, the ones that needed to be purchased right up front.
And I think it's worth pointing out as well that this year, and we haven't done it in the past, but there was going to be no small capital. So we did not submit a list of items. We were asked to wait until October.
I thought that was large.
That's
capital.
large.
I'm
Large
sorry,
cap,
the large
right.
capital. So there are items that we've already
Was
postponed.
put off till October.
Um,
Well, they've been postponed, some of them for 3, 4, 5 years, but, yes.
Yeah, but we would have gotten the other piece of the security project.
Right.
Those type of items.
All of this is good news. This is just a report, really.
It is.
There's no
Yep.
position that we have to take on it because we don't have the final information yet.
Right.
You know, but just so that we consider both sides, there is some wisdom in, the amount is small enough to not going forward to request priority 3. We know that this money will sustain us for 1 year, and that next year we'll be looking for more funds. So is it worth cutting back, holding back level 3? And Steve says it's about $300,000.
No.
And putting something.
It's 188.
But you added it.
But he added back in the small cap and the
Oh, right.
athletic fee,
And also the benefits.
and the benefits.
But the athletic fee, we're gonna charge anyway, so.
It's, priority 3 is 188, about 11,000 in benefits, 70 in small cap, and 35 in athletic fees. It's about 300,000. Right? Is that the same?
My mind is sitting.
But just, you know, if we're planning on something again next year, hopefully a little bit longer term one, like the one we had a few years back to sustain us for a number of years, would we go to the well twice? Or do we, you know, just hold back on priority 3 and roll it into an override effort for next year that's a little bit larger to sustain us for a few years?
Well, I was thinking just the opposite, go forward with the override this year, because obviously we need to sustain ourselves going forward, but that makes a lot of sense.
I don't think it's built in to sustain us
Yeah.
beyond 1
No,
year.
that makes a lot of sense, if we were gonna consider, gonna find ourselves in a position next year, and we'll be an override, that may be the right time
We
to do
won't
it
get-
for the right
yeah.
amount.
But if the selectmen are still going to put an override on the ballot
Yeah,
this
we should
year,
be included in it.
we should be included in that override.
So that's a discussion that we need to have at the finance planning
Right.
team.
Yeah.
So would it be fair for Mel and I to say that the whole committee is looking for more direction, to have that conversation?
Well, I mean, if they're gonna have an override on the ballot, the selectmen, do they need an override? I mean, they're looking for funds,
I guess they were gonna be restoring some of the positions that they were cutting to get to priority 1 for us, correct?
Yes.
And
I'm
when
not
they,
sure.
yes, at their meeting, once they, in order to get us to priority 1, get us funded, that included cutting 1 position out of rec. It included.
Shifting it to
Right,
revolving.
shifting it to revolving,
Right.
and their override included putting that back in the budget. Their override included putting, trash fees back into the budget.
Right, but they may find themselves in a place where those aren't actual layoffs, and do they consider doing that for 1 year and going next year?
well, I
A
would
larger one?
give this direction to the members of the finance planning committee, that if the town is going, if they feel it's necessary to include an override on the town meeting warrant and on the ballot, that we should be included in that.
Yes.
amount. But if there's a determination made that maybe we should all just wait until next year, I would agree with that, so,
Okay,
all right?
yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah. That's at least my position on this stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, I think there might be some wisdom in putting together a more sustainable budget.
I mean, now, do we have a deal with the selectmen on this budget? I mean,
No.
in other words,
We haven't heard directly from you.
okay,
No?
okay. So if they are funding us through priority 2, we'd be willing to obviously accept that deal and go forward as a united front on that.
Mhm.
with the
I
selectmen.
think
I
that's
hope so.
pretty
We
much
have to
how
make
it
that
was
clear to our
presented.
constituents too.
Right.
That if they are willing to come up with the funding to get us through priority 2, then that's our position.
And
Yes.
I believe, with all the work that Mr. Misery has done and the Board of Selectmen, that to to get to priority two without the need for an override, at least on the school side,